Hello and welcome to another booktube video from me, Martha May Books. I hope you're all doing very well. Today I have for you my August wrap-up, but it's going to be a bit different because in my last wrap-up, which was my July wrap-up, I found it so hard to remember all of my thoughts of the books that I had read a whole month ago. So I thought I would, throughout the month, every time I finish a book, sit down and tell you what I thought about it. So it's sort of like a ongoing monthly wrap-up, and then I'll edit them all into one wrap-up. The lights are going to change, my outfits are going to change, everything is going to be different. Also, it's boiling today. I'm so hot. The first book that I want to talk about in my August wrap-up is Fool's Errand. The reason why it's the first book I want to talk about is because it's the first book I read. Wild. It is book one of the Tawny Man trilogy. The Tawny Man trilogy is the second Fitz trilogy in the realm of the Elderlings series by Robin Hobb, but between the first Fitz series and this series there's the live ships as well. So I had to get my friend who had read, what do they call it? Assassin's Quest. She had read Assassin's Quest, I think last month she finished it, so she had to well, she didn't have to, but she kindly did tell me all of the things that I had forgotten happened in Assassin's Quest, and it's wild. If you've read it, you know, it's wild. So The Fool's Errand follows Fitz post all of the things that happened to him in the first trilogy, and he's kind of getting back into the command of the Farseer the Farseer royal line. So that's all I can say without spoiling it for you. That's the whole thing. I read Fool's Errand, I gave it 5 stars. The next book that I read in August was Miss Benson's Beetle by Rachel Joyce. So this is a historical fiction book set in the 1950s in Britain and then Australia and New Caledonia. And it follows Marjorie Benson, who leaves her job as a home economics teacher to pursue her lifelong goal of hunting, catching, discovering the New Caledonia golden beetle. So in the first part of this book we follow Marjorie as she is looking for an assistant to help her on her adventure, and she interviews a whole bunch of people but ends up having to hire a lady called Enid Pretty, who I think it's fair to say is underqualified for the position. The way that this was sold to me is that they are two women that are complete opposites from one another, but who form an unlikely friendship through the difficulties that they face on their adventure and through coming through adversity together. We're also following a man called, I think, George Mundick, but throughout the book he's just known as Mundick, who was a prisoner of war during the Second World War and who now seems to be suffering from various mental health issues. He suffers from flashbacks and not being able to differentiate between what he's imagining and what's in the real world. So I really enjoyed the plot of this novel. I think I would say that the plot seems to be secondary. The goal of finding the beetle is more like a framework that then their characters can develop within. Wouldn't say that it's necessarily a massively plot-driven novel. It's more about the characters. There is a plot, whereas a lot of character-driven novels, there's less of a plot. I think they're both equal, the amount of like character development and plot, but it is more about them as characters. There's also a few twists in this. There's kind of a sinister background. In the foreground we have Marjorie and Enid and their adventures getting to New Caledonia and then hunting for the beetle, and then in the background we also follow Mundick as he is following them, and also a crime investigation that's happening in London. There were moments in this where I definitely felt like if I was going to cry at it, this would be the point that I cried. And I didn't cry. That says to me that I wasn't massively attached to any of these characters. I am a fan of Rachel Joyce. I have read The Unlikely Pilgrimage of Harold Fry. I've read The Love Song of Miss Queenie Henderson. Is that what it's called? I've also read The Music Shop and her Snow Garden short story collection. So I've read quite a lot from her. And in comparison to those other books, I found this one a lot darker and more sinister, which I really enjoyed. Rachel Joyce's books generally do have a darker undertone, but what I found with this one is that there was a lot more peril coming from the outside, as in they had, like, Enid and Marjorie had enemies that were trying to hinder them in some way. There was a lot more peril and it was a lot higher stakes than some of the other books. I rated it 4 stars. I know that throughout this review I've been saying stuff that like would make it seem like I didn't enjoy this. I really enjoyed this and I rate purely on enjoyment. So the next book that I want to talk about is Nick and Charlie by Alice Oseman. This I think was an ebook for a while before now and then has been published as a physical book with illustrations that Alice Oseman has done. I read this as an ebook from my library. I don't think it had the illustrations in. Nick and Charlie is a contemporary novella which follows the brother of the main character from another one of Alice Oseman's books, which I've not read. But Nick and Charlie also have the Heartstopper comics and graphic novels, which are on Tapas, and also I think it's like every year, maybe more often, a graphic novel of the Nick and Charlie comics and the Heartstopper comics comes out. And I love the Heartstopper comics, and so I thought I would read this when I saw it on the library, because I had a few days before Scallywagathon started and I'd finished Miss Benson's Beetle and I had a break before I could start Heidi, which was my first book for the Scallywagathon, and so I thought I would read something short in between those 2 books. It's very cute. So this, the Heartstopper comics follow Nick and Charlie as they start dating and kind of figure out everything that goes along with that. This novella follows Nick and Charlie. How many times did I say Nick and Charlie in one clip? As Nick is going off to university and Charlie, because he's in the year below, is left behind, and how they work that out. So it's 50 pages long. It's fairly like angsty, like teenage, like high school drama kind of angst feeling of like not really communicating exactly what you mean to your partner, and also, you know, thinking about uni and stuff like that. So I rated this 3 stars. It was fine. I think that the published, like the physical book with all of the illustrations in and everything will be better because you also get to see, I don't really know what's in there, but I've seen that there are pictures. For fans of Heartstopper, it will be a more enjoyable experience. And it wasn't that I didn't enjoy this, it was just that it was 50 pages long, and so what do you sort of get in 50 pages other than a short little story about teenagers being angsty and saying that their relationship is different from every other teenage relationship? And that's what I got. But I liked it, I had a good time. It was just, I often rate novellas and short stories lower unless they really massively blow me away, because I just feel like I need longer for the story to have a bigger impact, and I suppose we have got the background of the Heartstopper comics. And then the next book that I read was Mum Life by Louise Pentland. I'm not a mother, if you can't tell, but I do watch Louise Pentland's channel. It's a autobiographical account of Louise Pentland's life. I think that all of the proceeds from the sales of the book are going to the NSPCC. Talks about motherhood, which is what her channel's a lot about. She talks about dating, talks about stuff that she's mentioned in videos but not really gone into detail about, which is why I wanted to read it. I always feel weird rating non-fiction that's about someone's life, like autobiographies and things, because that's someone's life and that's how they've chosen to write it down and tell you about it. I enjoyed it. I really felt for Louise at certain points within this, and really laughed at some of the stories that she told about dating. The next book that I read in August was Heidi by Johanna Spyri. So this book, this is a children's classic fiction. I think it was written in 1880. Well, it was published in 1880. And I think it was originally published in German and then became really popular and was translated into English. I think this is the 1975 translation. What did I think of Heidi? Well, it's very cute. I'll give it that. If you don't know, I didn't know. Heidi follows Heidi, who, when she's 5, is taken up to the mountains to live with her granddad because her aunt who's looking after her, because Heidi's an orphan, doesn't want to look after her anymore because she's got a better job and she doesn't want to look after her. So Heidi goes and lives in the mountains and has a wonderful time for like 3 years. She's loving it. And then along comes the aunt again, and the aunt is like, hey Heidi, do you want a job even though you're 8 years old and having a nice time? Because people can't imagine that she would have a nice time living with her grandfather because everyone else hates her grandfather, which I thought we'd learn why. Because like the aunt says, oh, don't make me tell Heidi things about you that you don't want her to know. What are these things? But anyway, the aunt comes along and basically kidnaps Heidi. She like drags her down the mountain and she's like, you've got to come. Heidi's job is to, well, I don't know if it's a job, because is she paid? She's sort of paid, but like she hates, anyway, I'll get into it. Heidi's role is to be the companion of a girl who is a wheelchair user, and she's really bored in her lessons. Maybe just get a better teacher, but okay, bring an 8-year-old in. I don't know if this is spoilers because it's really old, but I suppose it's spoilers, so, you know, don't listen to me if you don't want spoilers. Heidi's friends with this girl who's called Clara, who's a girl from Frankfurt, and like she brings like kittens into the house, which we never hear of again. Where are these kittens? Are they just in the attic? Do they get fed? Are they playing kitten Hunger Games in the attic? Then Heidi spends months in this house. Like, she messes around in the lessons, which is why Clara likes her, because she makes the lessons more interesting. She's allowed to go back to the mountains. But, and this next part is spoilers, then what happens is Clara, after like loads of faffing about, like the doctor comes and he's like, wow, this is lovely. Then what happens is Clara then comes to the mountains and is magically healed by goat milk and the mountain air. Which, I mean, that's lovely, but it's sort of in a similar vein, I found, to The Secret Garden, where it's like classic children's literature about a child with a disability that's magically healed by nature, and a child that has embraced nature's spirit. Which is just sort of weird to me, because like, that's not a fun thing to read if you're a child with a disability, because most disabilities aren't magically healed by goat milk. Now that's a statement. That was kind of weird and I didn't like it. I think it would have been nicer if we'd have just seen Clara have a lovely time in the mountains without needing to have her be cured. It's just not a great message. I mean, it's very of its time. The other thing is that Clara is often referred to as the invalid rather than Clara, which I didn't like, because her name is Clara, she's got a name, we don't need to refer to her as the invalid, we can call her her name. So that was Heidi. There were nice parts in it. I thought that the descriptions of the mountains were lovely. I do now want to go to the Swiss Alps, so well done, Johanna, you've convinced me. Also, like, the portrayal of Heidi was kind of weird. Like, she's sort of this perfect little child who's so pure that she can make really grumpy people like her, and everyone loves Heidi, and that's great. But it's just sort of weird, like Anne of Green Gables, which is in the same series, so I couldn't help but compare them. And they're quite similar, like orphan girl goes to nature with slightly grumpy people that don't immediately want her, has a lovely time. Anne makes mistakes and she's not perfect, and we see more from her perspective, whereas Heidi is like perfect and we don't really see from her perspective. We just sort of hear about all of the like generous and angelic things that she does. Also, I love these editions. These are the Puffin and Bloom editions. But on the front cover, Heidi is blonde with a plait going over her head. I assume it's Heidi because I assume this is grandfather. It could be Clara because Clara is blonde, but I assume it's Heidi because otherwise where's Heidi on the cover of her own book? But Heidi's not blonde. Heidi has black hair. My whole life, because I used to do this hairstyle where you like put the plaits over your head. I can't do it now because I cut my hair. But my whole life when I would put my hair like that, people would be like, oh look, it's Heidi. She never does that. She's got short black hair for the whole book. So what is going on? I gave it 3 stars and I enjoyed it for what it was. I enjoyed it despite these things. and it was cute. But I still want to know where these kittens are. Pet. I read Pet first. So Pet by Akwaeke Emezi is I would call it a novella, but I don't know, because it could just be like quite a short novel, which is set in a time and a place where monsters have been eradicated from society. And these monsters are people that do bad things, and they're put in like rehabilitation rather than prisons. And the society as a whole is like, monsters are gone. But one day, Jam summons a actual monster, not a person that does monstrous things, a monster, out of her mother's painting. And Pet is here to hunt human monsters. Is this making sense? I liked it. I rated this 4 stars. So I always struggle with shorter novels to get into the characters and to get into the story, because I'm used to reading chunky novels and chunky books where you have like 200 pages of world building and character building before the plot starts. I think when I read a shorter book, I'm like, right, but I don't know the characters, what's going on with the world? But it's fine, it's just a shorter book. So I rated it 4 stars. What I took from this book is that if you say all monsters are gone, this doesn't happen anymore, then you lose the ability to look out for it. And so in Jam's society, what they do is they say monsters don't exist anymore, rather than educating people that monsters do still exist and giving the people in the society the tools to recognise when a monster is operating. The other thing that I want to mention is the writing. So what I found with the writing style in Pet is that it's kind of simple writing style where you get to know what's happening, but then every now and then there's like glorious visual descriptions of something, and I loved that. I wouldn't have wanted it all of the time. I'm not saying that Akwaeke Emezi should have written more and more and more beautiful graphic writing. I'm not saying that. I'm saying I liked how much there was, because the simple writing moves the story forward, and the detailed writing and the descriptive writing makes the emotions. I'm explaining it badly. I liked it. Let's move on. So then the next book I read, and this was also for Scallywagathon, just like Pet and Heidi, was Frenchman's Creek by Daphne du Maurier. This is actually a pirate book, which I was really pleased about. Well, I wasn't. If you watched my TVR, I was not happy that I had to read this, but I was pleased about it during Scallywagathon because I wanted to read a pirate book in a pirate readathon. So this follows a woman called Donna, who is a lady, and she basically runs away to her husband's country estate in Cornwall because she has done some dodgy things in London and she's embarrassed herself, and she doesn't like the person that she is when she's in London, and so she runs away to the countryside in Cornwall to be herself and to not be the lady that she behaves as in like a kind of a scandalous way. And so she runs off to the countryside, and what she does is she meets a pirate who is French, and it's a love story, and it's about how she kind of starts living a double life. Half of her is like Lady Donna, who looks after her children and runs the household and writes letters to her husband and meets her husband's friends from the countryside, and the other half of her she calls the cabin boy, and she runs off and has pirate adventures. So I liked this. I think I rated it 3 or 4 stars between the two. I can't really remember, but between those two. It's definitely of its time. It's a classic. I think it was published in 1941. Maybe able to find it now, I bet. Yeah, it's first published in 1941. So there is language in here and descriptions of travelling community that aren't great and sort of weird, and also generalisations about French people in this, done by sort of the English lords that are against the pirate guy. Donna is my favourite Daphne du Maurier heroine. So I've read Rebecca and I've read Jamaica Inn, and both of the protagonists in those books annoyed me so much because they're so rubbish. Like, if you've read Rebecca, you know the whole point of Rebecca is that the second Mrs. De Winter can't live up to the first Mrs. De Winter, and she's not as good, and she's rubbish. And so it's okay that she's rubbish. In Jamaica Inn, I actually read it more recently than I thought I did, but I can't really remember that much. But the protagonist, every time she uncovers something to do with smugglers, which is what Jamaica Inn is about, she faints. Like, either stop investigating the smugglers or find out a way that you're not going to faint when you investigate them, because you need to sort that out. But Donna in this is a lot more spirited. There's a lot in this about how a woman can't help but eventually want a family, and also that a woman's worth is based on the fact that she has children. So it says, this is the pirate. You forget, he said, that women are more primitive than men. For a time they will wander, yes, and play at love and play at adventure, and then, like the birds, they must make their nest. Instinct is too strong for them. Birds build the home they crave and settle down into it, warm and safe, and have their babies. And then earlier is a good quote from Donna. Do you mean he's quite unscrupulous? I fear so. So she's talking to one of the like posh countryside men that's really against the pirate. And are his men most desperate and savage? They are pirates, madam, and Frenchmen at that. Then I will take the greatest possible care of my household. Are they, do you think, cannibals also? My baby son is not yet 2. And she's like making fun of them for being so dramatic about this pirate that's annoying them all. And I liked that. So that's Frenchman's Creek. Next, my battery's flashing me. Great. Really soothing way to review The Deep by Alex Rogers. So this is a non-fiction novel about the hidden wonders of our oceans and how we can protect them. I thought going into this that this was going to be a lot more based on the animals in the ocean. Even now, the vast majority of this wilderness, which covers over 70% of the planet and forms its largest ecosystem, has never been seen by human eyes, let alone explored or investigated by scientists. Yet our oceans contain perhaps 90% of all life, and the physical and biological processes within are critical to supporting our existence on Earth. So I sort of thought that it was going to be more about exploring the animals that we don't really get to hear that much about, which it was. I heard a lot about sponges, clams, corals. I know we speak about corals a lot, but yeah, crabs, little worm creatures, which I liked those parts. I liked hearing about the weird animals. But a lot of this is about climate change and how climate change is, and the climate emergency is impacting the oceans and the creatures, and also us, because the ocean makes a lot of oxygen, traps a lot of carbon dioxide, a lot of other things. I read the book, I promise. I didn't enjoy this. I found this very informative and I found it very useful, and I didn't give it a rating because it was sort of half memoir of Alex's adventures being a marine biologist. I don't know if that's his actual title, and his kind of adventures on boats. And then, so there's partially that. There's partially some discussion on the weird animals that live underneath the ocean, but I would have liked more. And then thirdly, there's a lot of talk about everything that's going wrong with the ocean and how humans are ruining everything, which was good to know, but I didn't know it going into it. I was expecting fun animals and I got climate emergency. Quite heavy to read. And that's another reason why I didn't give it a rating. I didn't enjoy reading it, but I know the importance of reading it. So I didn't want to give it like a 3 because I had a miserable time reading it, when actually the fact that I had a miserable time reading it, I should have had a miserable time reading it. I shouldn't be having fun reading about seal clubbing and whaling and oceans warming and rising and choking tunas and all of that. And those are all of the books that I read in August. Please let me know in the comments down below if you have read any of these books, because I would love to hear what you thought of them. Thank you so much for watching my August wrap up. I know it was a little bit weird to have all of the clips jumping around, but I quite enjoyed not having to remember all of the books, what I thought of all of the books at the end of the month, and doing it throughout the month. So let me know if you liked this format. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!